hakaba hagiye kuganirwa ku mugore n'ubukungu, kureba uburyo umugore ashobora gutezwa imbere mu bukungu. Aha tukaba turi kumwe na PS muri Mejaprofe, Mireille, tubahaye ikaze.
Yakoze cyane.
Ni ibibazo twavuga uyu munsi bibangamiye umugore kugera ku bukungu?
Navuga ko ibibazo bimubangamiye n'ubundi ni ikibazo twavuga cyo kugera kuri ubwo bukungu, nyine ikibazo cya access, haba ari mu gukoresha no gukorana n'ibigo by'imari, haba ari mu bijyanye no kubasha kwizigamira, haba mu bijyanye no kwihangira imishinga. Ubwo icyo cyari kimwe mu bijyanye no kugera ku mari, ariko nanone ikijyanye n'ubumenyi niho twari tuvuze uburyo umuntu yiga akamenya gukora umushinga umubyarira inyungu, akamenya aho akura amakuru, akamenya uburyo akorana n'abandi kugira ngo bagire ibyo bageraho. Ariko nanone dufite ikibazo cy'ikoranabuhanga, aho usanga ikoranabuhanga ryoroheje ibintu kugira ngo abantu bagere kuri izo serivisi, babona ayo makuru. Ariko iyo urebye umugore n'ikoranabuhanga naho usanga tutari ku rugero rwiza rushimishije, umugore ntaragera aho twifuza, aho yifuza kuba ari. Nibyo bibazo cyane, ngira ngo n'ibyo byose bigiye kuganirirwa hano. Hakaba ari inama ihurije hamwe ibihugu bigera kuri 54 ni ibihugu by'ubunyamuryango bya Commonwealth. Ibi rero bikaba ari bimwe mu byinshi bikomeje kuganirirwa ahangaha, ubwo tuzagenda twumva imyanzuro itandukanye.
To see all of you back again, I wanted to just confirm if we've had a great lunch. Have we had a great lunch? Yes? Nice. I want also to confirm another concern that was raised earlier on about the temperature in the room. Are we comfortable with what we have now? You want it colder or warmer? All right. All right, we'll coordinate that with the ushers to be able to help us to have that. So let us be seated kindly. Let me have your attention so that we can be able to introduce the speakers and the moderator for the next session. And the session that we're about to go through at this particular moment is a very interesting one and very close to my heart as a business journalist, and that is women's economic empowerment, breaking barriers. Very important, because most of the things we've had over the better part of today has been talking about how do we break the barriers, how do we now act. And of course, I'm hoping that we'll be able to pick so much from this next session that is about to begin. So I will introduce the moderator who will eventually call on the stage the speakers who will be participating in this very important session. Remember, we are still pushing this beyond these walls on social media. All you need to do is add the hashtag CWF 2022 and check out at CHOGM 2022 to be able to check if someone has tagged you in that selfie that you just took earlier on before you went for lunch. Allow me to introduce Arif Zaman, who is the FRSA Executive Director, Commonwealth Business Women's Network. He's going to lead this next session, and he will eventually call the speakers on stage. Let's give Arif a round of applause as he comes to the stage. We can do better. We're just from lunch, eh? Thank you very much. Arif, thank you. Welcome.
Right. No pressure. First one after lunch. You're still here, which is encouraging for CHOGM. Okay, so my name's Arif Zaman. I am a man, absolutely. And as we were being reminded several times this morning, in fact, as the chair of the Commonwealth Businesswomen said to me once, she said, look, there's one reason why we need men to work with us, because if you want to have a party, we want to get to the party more quickly. So we need to be men and women working together. So I'm one of the founder directors of the Commonwealth Businesswomen's Network. We are one of the 90 accredited organizations, the official Commonwealth, if you like, a key part of the Commonwealth family with the governments, the Commonwealth Secretariat, and I'm delighted that we put this panel on today. You know, 10 years ago, this language would have been a bit unusual, perhaps, economic empowerment. Certainly the Commonwealth was just beginning to use it, but we are meeting at a very important moment. Only a few days ago, the World Trade Ministers came together eyeball to eyeball. What you're all doing. You're all doing that right now. Eyeball to eyeball, face-to-face contact. We sometimes wonder why world trade is in the mess it is right now. Well, maybe if these trade ministers would get together more often face-to-face, it might be a better thing. But they did last week. And, you know, one of the areas that they were talking about was women in trade. And I'm delighted that we're going to be talking about that in our first part of our panel today. And the second part of the panel is going to home in on this area of women's entrepreneurship. We've got some really exciting people to talk to us about that. But before we go anywhere, I want to pick up on actually a comment that the First Lady made this morning. The First Lady used a phrase about not, and I quote, not tiptoeing around the economic emergency. Okay? Not tiptoeing around the economic emergency. And with respect, First Lady, you nailed it. You nailed it. Because it's not about tiptoeing around it. It's actually how we can use this moment. Not just this moment in terms of the economic situation in the world right now, but in fact the next 4 or 5 days here in Kigali to drive forward on all the things that we care so passionately about. And I think that one of the routes to that, this was being talked about only last week when the World Trade Ministers met, one of the routes to that is through trade and women's economic empowerment. And it is one of the 4 gender priorities of the Commonwealth, and so we're delighted to have this panel today. So I'm also going to just say a quick word about the people that aren't in the room. Yeah? Always need to remember the people that aren't in the room, yeah? So when we heard the speaker from Afghan, and I could feel the feeling in the room, the speaker from Afghanistan, let's be reminded that today is actually World Refugee Day. Yes, it is World Refugee Day. And there's a link with what we're talking about here as well. When we talk about the girls in school, let's remember the girls that aren't in school, that need the education. When we talk about the girls in education, what jobs are they going into? Not in 5 years or 20 years, how they look. Maybe they don't even exist right now. Maybe they can be part of defining what that is. And think about some of this language. Ed tech, create tech, health tech, fin tech, fashion tech. Didn't exist. A year ago, we organized an event with the British government and Commonwealth organizations on exactly this area, the emerging tech spaces for women, the emerging spaces for women. And let me just, before I go any further, let me just also reiterate a link to the last Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. The UK government, and I know they're in the House somewhere, in the room somewhere, I'm sure. The UK government is the current chair of the Commonwealth in the remaining few days that they are chair. And it was a very important breakthrough, the last Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in London. I was there with some of you here in this room, and the paragraph that was agreed by 54 heads of government was the most wide-ranging paragraph talking about women in trade. It didn't just say women in trade are important. Well, that's easy to say, isn't it? Doesn't say much. But it said we need to address things like women trading internationally. We need to look at the success rate of women-owned businesses. We need to look at this across sectors. This was important language. And that provided an impetus for, particularly while the UK has been chair, on a number of initiatives that have been driven forward, which we'll be touching on briefly this afternoon as well as part of our panel discussion. So the point I'm trying to make is this discussion today is not a one-off. It is a journey, the journey we heard about this morning, and it's that part of the journey that perhaps right now, right here, can be really crucial in getting our economies moving again so that they are not just inclusive, but they are really inspirational. So let us, with that little intro, you know, I'm up here, and I've done a few of these, but I'm a little bit apprehensive, but I'm thinking of my 10-year-old and my 14-year-old girl, and I'm reminded of this point I wanted to say, actually. To all the men in this room, the next time you meet someone that doesn't get it in terms of women's economic empowerment, challenge them, and remind them that they had a mother, possibly a sister, possibly a cousin. And remember these 2 words, and this was said to me by the former Bangladesh High Commissioner in London, and we had the Bangladesh government here as well. And he said, Arif, this is actually on International Women's Day, he said, Arif, the challenge is not patriarchy, it's embedded patriarchy. It's embedded patriarchy. And that's why women's economic empowerment is so crucial, and that's why we're going to talk about it this afternoon. So without further ado, enough from me. Let me invite on our first speaker. We're very delighted to have with us Professor Sangeeta Karuna. She is with the Institute of Export, which goes back to 1935, Sangeeta. I know you weren't there then, but that's when it started, the Institute of Export and International Trade. She's also Professor of International Business at Bournemouth University, beautiful seaside location in the UK, and she's also on secondment to the UK Department of International Trade, and she was there in the room last week at the World Trade Ministers meeting. Sangeeta, please come down. A round of applause, please. So I'm going to invite all my panelists up at the same time, which I think I'm supposed to do. I'll make sure I do it. So you can see all of them, all of them that are with us. So the next person I'm going to invite up, before I go through in the sequence that you see them, is Aissa Toure Sarr, the country manager for the African Development Bank Group. Please join us on the stage. A loud applause. Come on, it's after lunch. You can cheer if you wish to. Okay. And the next one is, our next speaker, delighted to have with us, is Ms. Nadia Binti Amin, the chair of the Women's Entrepreneurship for Development Association from Bangladesh, please. Now, there is a speaker on your program that isn't with us, and I'm going to say briefly, before we get into this, just 2 minutes about her. She went to get her badge, and she was tested positive for COVID. So she's not actually joining us physically now. However, I know, because I was with her last week at this amazing event, and Kigali, you pulled it off really last week, 150 governments here in Kigali, these are ministers and governments representing technology. They secured in 10 days in Kigali 250 resolutions to work together. Russia was in the room, Israel was in the room, Palestine was in the room. And they secured commitments of $25 billion to address specifically issues around technology and development. And I can tell you that there was one individual, she was here this morning, I don't know whether she's here now, there was one individual that countries were queuing up to commend at the end, queuing up to commend. She was the president of the whole conference. It was the ITU Telecommunications and Development Conference. And that person, and every Rwandan African should be proud, in fact, every Commonwealth citizen should be proud of the Honourable Minister Paula Ingabire, who really was a masterclass in how to manage a consensus-based approach, and she brought, that meeting together. And one of the things that I'd like our panelists to think about, and I said this to them, when we think about what you're saying today, and this is what Millie Ogden would have said if she was able to join us. She's the CEO of an internet service provider in Vanuatu in the Pacific. She's also a trade commissioner for Vanuatu in California. She said, let's remember the opportunities we get from technology and innovation. The challenges as well, but let's keep both in mind. So with that thought, enough from me, let me invite Sangeeta to come up and make her opening remarks. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for coming after such an excellent lunch that was hosted. It's my pleasure to be on the panel today, and an honor to be speaking at the Commonwealth Women's Forum on a topic that's really very close to my heart. Arif, thank you for the warm welcome. And thank you, Kigali. We've had a great experience. Let me begin by way of introduction that I'm wearing two hats for this session. I'm an economics professor at Bournemouth University in the UK, specializing in international trade and business. I also sit on the board of the Institute of Export and International Trade, and I am the chair of the academic board to provide for qualifications on international trade. I'm conscious that not all of you would be familiar with the Institute, so I'll just take a minute to just lay out what the Institute does. The Institute, as Arif mentioned, was established in 1935, and our mission is to support anyone with an interest in international trade. We have grown significantly over the past years, and we now represent over 7,000 organizations globally. Our footprint is expanding, and we have also expanded into several countries in Africa. The Institute is a key partner of the UK government, providing training and development and commercial services that enable organizations of all sizes to trade sustainably and competitively. And now we are increasingly working on trade in women, and that's where I come in. Without any further delay, let me start laying out the contours of where we are with regards to women in international trade, and how is it that trade can be used as a vehicle to empower women. And how can women actually address the barriers that they face today in international trade? Let me start by saying that the gender dimension is now increasingly debated at various levels, at the national level, at the international level. Now, internationally, well, last week, as Arif mentioned, we were at the MC12 in Geneva. And it was very interesting to note that the aspect of women in trade was fleshed out in great detail. And I'll give you 3 instances which will actually drive home the reality as to how important it is to integrate women in trade. We know that the DG of the World Trade Organization is a woman. So proud, she is a woman. And Director Ngozi actually met with us over breakfast. And the first thing she said was, I want to make sure that women are empowered and that we use trade to empower women. What a great moment that was for all women that are in this room and for all women worldwide. Now, interestingly enough, on the first day when the event started, we had several women entrepreneurs that came up and exhibited and presented their experiences. And most importantly, they actually shared perspectives and drew attention to the challenges their businesses had faced. And this was very important. And you know what? There were 4 countries. And very proud to say that Rwanda was one of them. And it was no one else other than Nova Coffee that was represented at that eminent forum representing women empowerment. So what a great time to be celebrating women empowerment at this forum today. Interestingly enough, the third aspect I would like to mention here is about the ITC Executive Director, Pamela Cook Hamilton. And at that event, the same evening, she actually said, and I quote, "We need to ensure that women can access finance and markets, and that we increase the number of Aid for Trade partners who support the gender and trade agenda." So I think I have been able to demonstrate to you that that the dimension of gender is increasingly being discussed at all levels. And it's being discussed at the highest levels. And we are very proud of that. Now, let me start by presenting some data about where we are in terms of gender representation in international trade. Of the 1 billion women in the Commonwealth, data shows that fewer than 1 in 2 women work. Not a very good statistic. Among those who work, 80% occupy medium and low-skilled jobs. Interestingly, a study by the World Bank in 2020 found that most women, and we also know this, that most women actually work in the informal sector. And if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, we find 90% of the women here work in these countries, work in the informal sector. Now, this is where the problem begins. This is where we have to start thinking how we will empower women in the informal sector, because that's a very important challenge. Let me also mention here that in developing countries, women actually make up 33% of the workforce of firms that export, whereas they are only 24% of non-exporting firms. So clearly we see that women are playing a very important role when it comes to exporting and hence also in international trade. Now, the gender element has been discussed. We talk within the context of free trade agreements, and interesting to note that countries are increasingly incorporating the gender dimension in their trade agreements, and they are now coming up with a chapter. And one of the first such examples is by the UK, which actually came up with a chapter, which is chapter 24, on gender with Australia. So this is actually the beginning of a brilliant movement that we are all part of. And I hope you will join me in applauding this great work that has been done by the British government. Now let's take a step back and start thinking about what did COVID do to women participation in international trade. Studies suggest that women equity suffered from the disruption, from the supply chain disruptions that we all experienced, you all also experienced during the pandemic. And why is it that women equity suffered? Why did it go the wrong side? We were actually moving in the right direction until COVID hit. What was the reason for that? Let me flesh that out. A couple of 2-3 reasons basically. First, with 30% of women workforce employed in service-based industries, women basically experienced a serious loss of employment during the pandemic because the sectors that suffered most were tourism and hospitality. And this was relevant for the Commonwealth and all other countries across the world. With regards to the Commonwealth, I would actually like to bring out an example of Bangladesh, and my co-panelist will develop on that a little more in detail. We know that in Bangladesh, it's a substantial proportion of women that actually support the ready-made garment industry. So women are actually employed intensively by the RMG sector in Bangladesh. When the pandemic hit, and let me tell you, just to give you some figures, 80% of the workforce is women that produce exporting garments for exports. Now, when the pandemic hit, interestingly enough, month 1, 46% of export orders were cancelled. But hold on and listen to what I have to say next. The next month, in April, 81% of export orders just vanished. So what happened? The direct hit was experienced by women who actually work in the ready-made garment sector, because 81% of export orders had been cancelled. And this is why we experienced the negative move towards equity, so the move towards equity started reversing for us. Also, what happened is that most women who work in the informal sector are the ones that did not manage to get any kind of formal loans from the government because they were simply not registered businesses. And one final point I would like to mention about the pandemic and the impact on women is that it basically increased the digital disparity between men and women. And here we are talking about technology and how great it is, but let's start thinking, how is it we can use technology to empower women? That is what the objective has to be, because we have to empower women to be very successful entrepreneurs. So in a way, COVID has put women employees, women consumers, and women entrepreneurs at the front line of the struggle when it comes to gender disparity. The gains that we had made in the past have been reversed, and there are fears, especially studies by the World Bank say, that the inequality may actually be further increased as a result of COVID. So COVID hasn't done us any favors. Now, over the past years, while there has been an increase in mainstreaming gender, we need to come up with policies that will actually ensure that women are able to integrate better into international trade. How can we do that? Actually, we need to build capacity of women entrepreneurs, and I will allude to that in a minute. First, let me talk about a very important initiative of the Commonwealth. And let me talk about the achievements and the learnings from the Commonwealth She Trades Initiative, because we are associated with that, and I'll talk about this in a minute. I'm sure very many of you are aware about the She Trades Initiative, which started off in 2015, and this is now in 25 countries through in-country projects and national hubs. She Trades is all about empowering women, and I thought this is the right forum to talk about it, because the focus is just empowering women and enabling them to connect with opportunities that can help them grow their businesses. And this is supported by the International Trade Center. There are now several hub centers, and glad to report that Rwanda is one. And the hub in Rwanda actually helps women to learn, grow, network, buy and sell. What more can you ask when we talk about women empowerment? Rwanda is leading the way. I'm proud to say that the Institute of Export and International Trade is also playing a very important part in supporting this initiative. So last week at the MC12 in Geneva, we actually scoped out an initial memorandum of understanding that explores opportunities to collaborate on agendas, including the promotion of female entrepreneurship capacity building. And we must build capacity to empower women. I think it's very important also to highlight here that building capacity is important, but we need to start thinking how we will build capacity. Education, but let's remember, in very many Commonwealth countries and in other countries of the world, not all women are educated. So how do we go about building that awareness about women empowerment and helping them grow and be more integrated in international trade? A, training. And B, what, in my opinion, I think it's important is to actually enable them to connect with a decentralized model that supports networking, that supports their entrepreneurial ambition. And I think I'll take a moment to reflect on a company that I'm associated with, and I'm on their board of directors. And this is a company by the name of Satin Credit Care in India. It's a company that actually provides loans without any collateral to women just for social empowerment. And I'm glad to report, in the last 23 years the company has been in existence, we have actually been able to support 3 million women in achieving socio-economic progress and launching them on the path to become successful entrepreneurs. I really salute the company. I think I'm running out of time, so I will just take one more minute and I will sum up. And I think I would like to sum up by stating 2 thoughts that come to mind. One, what we actually need is a powerful grassroots network. And you know what? It's we women who can drive that grassroots network revolution, so-called revolution. And this is a model that will connect women with women. So let's imagine all of us supporting each other and forming a human chain which will actually lead to women empowerment. That is my dream, and I hope it comes true. Second, and most importantly, I would like to conclude and say, you know what? Real change happens when we translate words into action. So let our journey begin. And it is really important that we provide women with a voice, which often we find they don't have in all countries and in all cases. Let us equip them with the practical tools. Let us provide them with insights which will enable them to be empowered and become successful entrepreneurs. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sangeeta. And I mean, just to link into some of those things, I think the importance that you've highlighted of the example you just gave in India, very, very powerful. And in fact, I think the potential also areas that you touched upon in terms of trade, the creative industries is a great example where you see women breaking through, but certainly not enough. But if you think of another fact, one of the most striking facts that I've heard recently, if you think about the unicorns, you know the unicorns? The unicorn is a private company that's valued at $1 billion, okay? One of the most famous in the world is the company behind TikTok. We all know TikTok, whatever we think of it. So these unicorns are billion-dollar companies. Well, here's a data point for you. If you look at the female unicorns this year with female co-founders, the top 4 in the world today are from Commonwealth countries. But where are they from? They're not from the ABCs, the Australia, Britain, Canadas. They're from Asia. They're from India, and they're from Singapore. But let's go a bit further. Let's look at those other those other unicorn co-founders, and let's look at their journeys. Where did their parents come from? You know about Barack Obama. You know about Kamala Harris. You know that their parents came from Commonwealth countries. And the same with some of those American citizens. They also have Commonwealth heritage as well. That figure goes up to 7. So what I'm saying is, right now, in the world, 7 of the top female co-founders of billion-dollar unicorn companies have Commonwealth citizenship or heritage. Now that's something. That is something. And I really hope that our governments and policymakers grasp that kind of evidence, because 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, that probably wouldn't be happening. And I'll tell you something else. Where are they working? What are they doing? EdTech, marketing, branding, IT. Some are in tourism and hospitality, but that's how the landscape is changing. So thank you, Sangeeta, for laying out that context to us, and also for bringing home to you the urgency of this. And that's the word, because the discussions that went on last week in Geneva, I believe during this week there's a follow-up meeting of governments in terms of consultations, further discussions on a number of areas, including, I think, trade and others. So this is a really hot topic, and I'm really pleased, Sangeeta, that you paid such a great picture for us in laying that out at the opening. So we're going to go in from there and hone in on Africa. Now, Africa is extremely important right now for a very simple reason. It is the biggest, and I mean, you can correct me in a moment, it's the biggest trade area in the world. You know, the fact that Africa is implementing the African Free Trade Continental Agreement at a time, let's be realistic, when we're seeing protectionism in other markets. Yes, I'm not going to mention Brexit, but there you go. There is protectionism happening, yeah? And yet in Africa, countries are getting more integrated. I think 42 or close to the last count, implementing trade integration in Africa. And that is a very, so we're actually going to hear now from someone that's certainly been involved in that through her role at the Africa Development Bank, Aissa Touré Sarr, the country manager for the African Development Bank, based here in Kigali. So she's been at the heart of some of this energy that you've seen for yourself. And I'd like you, I believe you're going to make your remarks from where you are, or whichever you prefer.
Thank you, Arif. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm also delighted to be part of this conversation because the subject, women economic empowerment, is also dear to my heart. I'm passionate about the subject. As an African woman, I strongly believe that our empowerment in general, including representation, including voice, start with economic empowerment. Until we get that one out of the way, right, and secure that one, the other one will not fall in place, at least at the pace we want them to happen. And this is a belief ever since I'm conscious about these issues. So as I explore the topic, I want to narrow it down. I think that Arif has introduced the subject to informal trade at borders in Africa from a woman perspective, because they represent 70% of cross-border trade in Africa. And also, I think that Sangeeta, you raised you provided a number, is 90% of the women in Africa are, informal sector is made by African women. And I think with those two figures in mind, and the fact also maybe a third one, some of our countries' informal sector, economic informal sector, accounts for 40% of GDP. This is massive. And yet the very big group that making that to happen are ignored. Cross-border, informal cross-border trade in Africa is very vibrant. It's a phenomenon that involves women. Obviously, I have said it, but they are invisible in that sector. Being vibrant, there is no account for it. There is no measure, and there is no enforcement. And this is, I think, some of the issues that I want to touch on here. The constraints that women in that sector face in informal cross-border trade are numerous. I'll start by the invisibility, and I think this is maybe the most painful, being invisible what they are doing and not being counted, right, for the big role that they are playing. They face stigma, they face violence, they face verbal and physical harassment. I don't know if, I'm sure that some of my African sisters here who know how it is difficult for some of the informal traders, women traders, to cross borders. Luckily, not everywhere in Africa. I remember crossing 10 years ago the Aflao border between Ghana and Togo. At that time, I was living in Ghana and witnessed a woman with a big basket of tomatoes on her head crossing to go to Lome to sell it. And she was harassed, and then I intervened, and she told me, you know, my sister, you don't know what you're talking about. Just let me pay and cross because my client is waiting for me, and if she doesn't see me in the next 30 minutes, somebody else will take the business. Just to tell you that, you know, there is the reality on the ground. This is what we are discussing in this forum, but the reality on the ground. And I'm not sure that that scene 10 years ago will not happen these days. So for all these reasons, harassment, very difficult working conditions, I think women in informal sector shy away for formalizing their business, right? And another dimension of this informal trade is the low value, right? Which for sometimes they don't think that it's worth going all the formalization because the transaction costs are too high. And these transaction costs and the hurdle they are facing can be categorized, I think, in three groups. The first one being lack of resources, financial resources, lack of social capital sometimes, lack of information. This is very important, and you alluded to it, Sangeeta. And if there is anything we can try to address here, at least as part of the discussion and the journey, is the lack of information on the regulations. Because when they exist, women don't have access to this information to be able to take advantage of the minimum that exists. They don't have information on customs, they don't have information on taxes, and it's very, and it's changed from one border to the other, between Ghana and Togo, within ECOWAS, who's supposed to harmonize, though it's written, but it's not enforced. And I think that this is a major, major issue. So I think access to information, access to resources, you know, and then access, support system. And I think we are all here responsible in our different capacities to ensure that that support system, as minimum as it can be, is assured to these ladies. And because you will agree with me that economic empowerment of women has a bigger impact on the society, on the family and the livelihood, right? because women who has access to resources will invest in health, in education, in providing food, right? Men, when they have access to resources, will buy TV or a bicycle or a watch. So we don't have the same priorities. So we really want to focus on who can make bigger impact at household level, at community level, at national levels. So it's not all gloom, fortunately. We have regional economic commissions, few in Africa. Some are doing quite well and trying to address these issues that I've mentioned. One of these solutions is the simplified tax regime that COMESA or the East African Economic Commission have put in place, right? To help women graduate from informal to formal sectors, in linking them to formal sectors, to have more visibility and take advantage of the regulations, have access to finance, have access to collaterals, because also they are not recognized by the formal financial sectors. But this is not a panacea. It's a beginning, but it's not a panacea, because also the volume, of their transaction could be as little as $10 or $50. Sometimes they don't think that it's worth going to that formalizations. But it exists and it has to be reinforced by all the regs. There is also an interesting trend that we see over the years with the one-stop border post. Rwanda has many, thanks to the African Development Bank. Rwanda has, and all West African countries, but I think this is across Africa, where you have this cross one-stop border post where traders in general, and particularly women, can process all transactions within 24 hours. It works very well between Rwanda and DRC, less well elsewhere, but at least they are there. But information have to be shared, information have to be disclosed to the women so that they can take advantage of those regulations. There are also many regional initiatives. I'm sure that many of you are involved in your respective capacities in that one. But Arish, you have said something very important, is the Africa Free Trade Agreement. This is really, really what we are all expecting and looking for, has the instrument at continental level that will improve all these issues that women, traders in general, but women in particular, are facing. And there are provisions in the African Free Trade Agreement for women and in the instruments. And I'm happy to report, I don't know if, I'm sure Minister Beata or her team are around. Rwanda is doing very well on that respect to enforce that one, because this is an opportunity really to bring informal women in the formal sectors, to bring them in the value chain where they will be able to collaborate and have partnership win-win with formal sector, which will give them access to finance, access to information, marketing, etc. And this is really, I appeal to everyone here in your respective capacity to look at this agreement and to see what can be done from where you're sitting. And I think it's very, very important. Because this really, the free trade agreement will materialize 100% the free movement of people and goods. If it is implemented the way it is written, right, I think that we'll be in a better place in 5 years and 10 years. But it has to be enforced. And it requires capacity building, awareness raising at all levels, from grassroots to national level. And I think I would just want also, before closing my remarks, to say that I explain what African informal traders are facing, but you can expand it one to African entrepreneurship, especially those in informal sectors. They have same issues: access to finance, access to collateral, to information, and to markets. And I want to maybe present you briefly, not to present, but just to tell you that African Development Bank has a flagship program which we called AFAWA, Affirmative Action, Finance Action for Women. It's a 10 billion project that is meant to address the many issues that we have been talking about. And I'm available to have further discussion and bilateral discussion on AFAWA and to see how AFAWA can benefit your respective countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I mean, capacity building, very important, trade-related capacity building indeed. We're going to go straight next to our next speaker, Ms. Nadia Binti Amin, so thank you very much for that. Ms. Nadia Binti Amin is chair of the Women's Entrepreneurship for Development Association in Bangladesh, the Commonwealth's third largest country by population.
Thank you. Okay. I would like to thank, first of all, chair of this session, or I call moderator, Mr. Arif Zaman, co-panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. And I'm very pleased to be with you this afternoon. I would like to thank Government of Rwanda and Commonwealth Businesswomen Forum hosting this event, for inviting me as a panelist to say a few words. I will keep it in this way, maybe in two segregation, as I'm from the business world and also working for the development of women entrepreneurs in our country. So first of all, I would go our country-based statistics. Then I will go into, practical case studies from our country. So, ladies and gentlemen, we just celebrated our 50th birth anniversary of our independence last year. And on the occasion, I like to thank all the countries and people who supported our long struggle to pursue the dream of peace and prosperity, free from hunger and poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, women's economic empowerment is important for achieving gender equality, achieving human development, removing poverty, and developing economic growth. It is evident from different studies that increasing women empowerment brings ultimately economic growth. Women's economic empowerment relates to the enhancement of women's capacity for strategic choice, the agency in the sphere of the economy, and to the possibilities this opens up for change in other spheres of their lives as well. Women, who are representing almost 50% of the total population, are contributing only 37% of the global GDP. However, women's contribution to GDP is much lower in the South Asian countries like Bangladesh, 19%, India, 18%, and Pakistan, 11%. Ladies and gentlemen, Bangladesh's development story over the past 50 years is full of development surprises and extraordinarily resilience of the people in the face of frequent natural disasters and made calamities. The country's economic transformation has largely been driven by social changes initiated by women empowerment, providing a rare example of non-liberal development model under which social progress has far outstripped economic growth. Bangladesh ranks 48 in global ranking of countries with a score of 0.721, indicating significantly better performance in promoting women empowerment compared to her social South Asian neighbors. World Economic Forum 2020 revealed that Bangladesh has closed 72.6% gender gap and ranks 50th in the index. Moreover, Bangladesh is top performer in the South Asia. Significant achievements in gender gap index have been made possible by serious consideration of gender sensitivity in the adoption and implementation of government policy strategy. In the year 2018, Bangladesh came in at number 48 in 149 countries. Currently, Bangladesh is at the top of the gender gap index in South Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, Bangladesh has adopted women-oriented or gender equitability policies. First, Bangladesh had drafted an inclusive development strategy involving various non-government stakeholders, including religious bodies, donors, and NGOs, which complemented public education and health interventions. This partnership helped bring about poverty reduction through services designed specifically to benefit impoverished and marginalized people, and in particular women. For almost 30 years, the country has been ruled by women prime ministers from either party, a feature of Bangladeshi politics that arguably license a relatively strong focus on the soft social sectors of health, education, and social protection by the government. The women's movement mounted several effective campaigns in key respects, pushing party politics towards greater recognition of women voters. The gender-related vision of 7th five-year plan, establishing a country where both men and women will have equal opportunities and rights of women will be recognized as equal contributions in economy. To achieve the target of SDGs, Bangladesh is committed for women development and to abolish all kinds of discrimination and inequality against women. From state management to administrating parliament, residing top position in police and military, flying airplanes, health, engineering, business, entrepreneurship, everywhere, women are successful. Today's higher courts have notable number of women judges. In UN peacekeeping mission, 190 women officers are carrying out their duties and vigilance. Distinguished participants, despite all these success, Bangladesh is no paradise of gender equality, and that women and girls face a broad range of discrimination, disadvantage because of their gender and its intersections with poverty and minority status. Violence against women and early marriage remain key concerns, and women and girls experience routine violations of their political, civic, and economic rights. It is notable that although Bangladesh scored well on the Global Gender Gap Index and Gender Inequality Index of the UN Development Programme, Human Development Report tells a different, and for Bangladesh, a less promising story. The GII measure the loss of potential in human development due to disparity between female and male achievements in productive health, empowerment, economic status. In Bangladesh, women constitute half of the populations, Women's labor force's participation rate is only 36.4% compared with men, whereas it's 84%. Women's participation in formal labor force is rising, but huge gender inequalities continue to persist. Women appear still to have very limited choice with regard to work option across broad sectors. Although many industries has declined in sex segregation. Although married women are in Bangladesh, labor force at much greater rate than they were a decade ago. The persistence of child marriage continues to be a significant barrier. Access to resources, if we consider, especially to financial resources, is important for women's economic empowerment. An equal property right is not present in Bangladesh. Women inherit property in comparison to men less. In Bangladesh, women cannot access and control over assets due to social and economic obstacles. This is from World Bank Group study. At present, only 12 to 16% women have control on household financial assets, whereas 14% women have control over financial services. Very few women are involved in entrepreneurial activities. Out of 53.6 million women, 19.1 million are part of the entrepreneurship forces. Among them, only 12% remains sustainable condition. Ladies and gentlemen, for moving towards the cherished development vision, the key for Bangladesh will therefore be to introduce good practices for increasing women's contribution to the country's formal economy through advancing women's economic empowerment, which multiple channels such as reducing structural barriers to women's productive economic participation, removing restrictive gender norms and stereotypes, creating institutional mechanism to assist the young women to plan their careers and ensure gender-sensitive balance between job and family responsibilities, providing non-traditional and innovative forms of employment for women, supporting private sector networks to promote gender equality in workplace and society, and other potential options. Now I would like to focus on COVID period, what we have been through, our women entrepreneurs in the country. As we know that women entrepreneurship has been recognized worldwide as an important source of economic growth. Globally, we know 50% are women. Globally, women more susceptible to economic shocks formed by these disasters of crisis such as coronavirus pandemic. As effect of COVID-19 rolled through economics, reducing business opportunity, triggering layoffs, so on. The majority of the women, we found that there was a huge dropout during this COVID, and it was near about 60% of the women entrepreneurs. They just, had to get out of their business, and we can share our study findings during question answer session. We have great findings what they were facing, the women entrepreneurs in our country during this COVID, and how they tried to overcome this phase, and they put their effort to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, I just want to highlight what Bangladesh did in the Women's Ministers meeting. They talked about the outcome of that was innovative financing mechanisms for women entrepreneurs. Well, that was in 2013. 2012, I think it was. Here we are, a decade later, still very important. Now it's your chance. Questions and answers in the audience. We have a few minutes remaining, but we certainly have questions and answers. So can I ask people to show their hands? I'm just going to go to the first row first. Can I have a microphone at the very front, please? Can I ask all speakers to briefly introduce themselves? And can I also ask you to limit your remarks to no more than a couple of minutes? And although that sounds a bit strict, I want to give maximum opportunity for people from the audience to speak. So just 2 or 3 minutes at the very most, and I think a microphone is with you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ari, for moderating so well, and I thank members of the panel.
Microphone, I think, just test this working. Thank you very much. I know you've got a great voice, but we want to make sure we all can hear it. Another one.
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much, Ari, the moderator, and members of the panel for a very, very useful discussion in this very important conversation. This is a conversation that is very dear to my heart, and I'm sure dear to everyone gathered here. I acknowledge all our distinguished great women in the hall. I acknowledge especially the Speaker of the House of Representatives that is here, and the great women of Rwanda who are really leading in every sphere. Can we join our hands to the government of Rwanda for making and setting the pace for women across the entire African continent? When we talk about economic empowerment, it is key. And without economic empowerment, we can't talk about political empowerment and all other empowerment. And the first empowerment that I would want each one of us to live here is education. Education is key. And as we all gathered here as family members of the Commonwealth, we have a great task before us. And I want to challenge all members of the Commonwealth to lead and not to be lacking behind. This is a topic that is central, and I commend the organizers of this forum. Looking back at the recent, just last week in Geneva, we had 123 countries that are leading in the world trade. And we are proud to say that one of us, a sister, a colleague, is the Director General, a woman, leading the World Trade Organization. We are proud that she's part of us, and I'm particularly proud that a Nigerian. Also, as Commonwealth, we must work together, struggle together, and lead, not to lag behind.
Thank you.
We are stronger when we are together. At the end of the World Trade meeting in Geneva, Lagos came out as the leading trade hub last week, as the leading trade hub of entrepreneurial ecosystem. We can have many more countries that would lead in this area if we work together, if we network together. And listening to all the 3 speakers in the panel, I can see light at the end of the tunnel. I commend the good work you are doing, and I believe that at the end of this discussion, we will network more and see how our countries can benefit more.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity that I have to share this with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister for Women's Affairs from Nigeria, referring to the agreement by 123 countries to sign an agreement on women in international trade. And the report she's referring to is the Global Entrepreneurship Network report on global ecosystems, where, as you say, Commonwealth countries in Africa were leading and not lagging. Now, I'm going to go in the interest of fairness. I'm going to go to the middle group, so I'm not discriminatory. Okay, I've got to be fair.
Honourable Moderator.
So the middle group, can I go to the...
Honourable Moderator, I have the mic.
Yep, can I go to the lady?
Okay, allow me to...
Thank you. You've got the microphone. Microphone is power. You've got the microphone. Yes, the lady in the second row. Thank you very much. Very briefly, please, just 2 minutes.
Yes.
And I will be strict to come
I
in.
handed the
Over to
mic
you.
before.
Over to you.
Thank you.
Allow
Thank you,
me-
Mr. Moderator.
Okay.
Please, the lady in the second row.
I'm Roslyn from Cameroon,
Thank you.
and I want to thank you for this opportunity. And I'm proud to say that Cameroon actually launched the She Trade in March last year. And standing here, I'm the president of an association that has benefited from She Trade. And I'm a lawyer by profession and a lecturer in the National School of Magistracy and Administration. But I head an association, and these women have an enterprise. But then She Trade has helped us, because as a leader of this association, these women have been able to benefit from the She Trade activities, and they've gone a long way. And each time there is an economic activity that is organized in our country, the government makes sure that members of the She Trade are involved. And this has brought together about 50 associations. And behind every president of an association, there are about 50 women. So you can imagine the number of women that She Trade Platform Cameroon has brought together. But then here I have a worry. My worry is with the grassroots women. She Trade saw us because being the leader of an association and considering the situation of the African woman, I tried now to see how an enterprise can be created so that the women of this association can empower themselves economically from this enterprise. And that is how She Trade got to know us. Now we have the rural woman who puts in her best, her efforts. She feeds the country, but her efforts are not valorized. She Trade has seen me in my country because I struggled to project myself. I just wish to ask this one question. What is She Trade doing to valorize the efforts of that woman, that rural woman down there, who produces and feeds the nation, but is not seen and is not heard? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to go panel, my panelists. I'm going to go in the interest of time to do 3 questions in one go, and then we'll come back and we'll see whether we can do more rounds. So in the interest of fairness to this side, I've got to have a gentleman asking. I know I'm a bit, but anyway, please go ahead. We'll ask.
Thank you so much,
we'll have
the moderator.
We'll have more questions. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I think, Honorable Moderator, I'm not going to sit anymore. We were told this morning,
Okay, so
if you want to ask for it.
Please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead. Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Honorable Delegates, Ministers. My name is Margaret Kobia, Minister for Public Service, Gender and Social Protection. And above all, I'm the Chairperson, Commonwealth Women Affairs Ministers. Allow me, Honorable Moderator, to say the whole topic of women economic empowerment is central to all the themes that we are dealing with this morning. In Kenya, we have an affirmative action which gives women in the grassroots, I had my sister ask here, loans to be able to go into small businesses and as an affirmative action. And that loan has done so well, it gives to about $100 to $1 million, depending on the capacity of the women. And that has also attracted banks, commercial banks in Kenya, to start finding women as bankable and calling them for loans, something they never used to do. Honorable Moderator, another thing I wanted to share very quickly is Kenya has just won AU African Gender Award. And we won because we were assessed access to education, access to health, governance, women economic empowerment, and also reducing HIV/AIDS. It was only brought from AU last week, Honorable Moderator, and we are very happy because one of the areas that was measured was women economic empowerment. Finally, because I want to give others an opportunity, our area is coming up, and I think Prof will just address to it, of unpaid care work. a lot of that is both the concept, how much of the literature there is, what we are doing moving forward, because that whole issue of unpaid care work, if it was ever meant to total to anything, then the whole issue of economic empowerment for women could be improved. At the same time, I think there's been a controversy. You don't want to start talking so much about unpaid care work, then it interferes with cultural practices, and at the end of it, we lose gains. Finally, let me say about education. Economic empowerment is very important because you have seen in Kenya, where there is poverty, we are losing because our girls are dropping out of school, getting to teenage pregnancy and early marriages. We must connect this economic empowerment with the retention of girls in school, which is key to gender equality. I thank you, moderator.
Thank you. I mean, Professor Kabir, I just want to take this opportunity of commending you.
I had the mic, Chair.
Can I, hold on, I want to take the opportunity of commending Professor Kabir for the last Women's Affairs Ministerial meeting in Nairobi. It was a groundbreaking meeting, and I think the agreement on gender mainstreaming, which is now being implemented, is a great example of that. So, tremendous achievements there, Professor Kabir and your team. Okay, the next, did anybody want to comment from the audience first? On any of the questions? You want to go? We'll go hear more. Okay, we'll hear more questions. So,
Thanks,
yes,
Chair.
Go ahead, sir, very briefly. Thank you. Just in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations to all the speakers. That was very powerful. Chair, we indeed need to look at how we can break the barriers to ensure that women across the world are economically empowered. However, Chair, my issue is, in most cases, when we meet in such high-level gatherings like this, maybe the focus is usually a specific age group. I wanted as Chair to challenge the Commonwealth that our conversation on economic empowerment for women should look at all women across the age cohorts. Chair, there are some facts, we cannot bury them under the carpet. One, older women across most of the countries in the Commonwealth, Africa to be specific, are contributing a lot of support to their families, to their communities, and the society at large through both paid and unpaid work, though that is not recognized. The COVID-19 pandemic has also shown how inequality, discrimination, and ageism has been going a lot towards older women, and that has not been recognized in most of our conversations. Most older women across Africa, in most of the lower and middle-income countries, they reach retirement or they get to an old age without assets, without accumulating any assets or savings, which would make them survive in old age. Yet, research continues to show that 40% of orphans in Africa are under the custodian of older women. But the conversation in such gatherings seem to focus on specific age groups which is able to deliver or to participate in other business forums. I would want, Chair, to challenge the Commonwealth to say, as we look at economic empowerment for women and breaking the barriers, what can be done to that older woman in Cameroon, in Rwanda, in Kenya, in Malawi, who has not been able to accumulate any assets as she goes into old age. But HIV and AIDS has made her a woman again and is looking after orphans. What can the Commonwealth do to ensure that the ministers sitting in here, the civil society, the business partners are able to support governments when they go back home and lobby for appropriate support towards older women? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, can I go? We're going to have, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep going through a few more minutes to take more. There's a lot of hands going up, and then at the very end I'll come back to my panelists to make any responses with concluding remarks. I think that's the best way to do it, since there's so much interest. Could I go to, I want to go to the very back of the room, because back isn't always easy to see, but I think that's fair. So to the very back, the person with the microphone, keep walking, keep walking. Keep walking, keep going, keep going, keep going. People in the back never always have a hard time putting a hand up. Someone in that last back row, I can see a hand going up. Yes, that's right. You've got your chance, please.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you, panelists, for the brief and brilliant presentation. My intervention will go to the women who are in the grassroots, who are also facing conflict, the internally displaced women and refugees. My name is Adamba. I'm the coordinator of Mother of Hope Cameroon, and I run an organization that works with women and young people, and I come from the conflict region of Cameroon. There's a lot of trainings which have been carried on the ground to empower women economically, but the problems we face are setting them up and putting them into full economic institutions where they can run their business on their own. There are not capitals. There are lots of hallmarks that hold women behind, and they cannot be able to move because of lots of taxes. They don't have subsidies. They don't have loans. And it's difficult for them to keep running the businesses and covering the expenses that they have in their homes and also in the communities. So my question is, what are we doing with the women who are suffering in the conflict regions, internally displaced and refugees, who really need our help for God? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think on World Refugee Day, that's an incredibly important question any day, but particularly on a day like today. So with a lot of questions that the audience have asked, and the time is diminishing by the minute, and I'll be hung, drawn, and quartered if I'm not respectful of time. I'm going to ask my panel to respond to any of the. You don't have to respond to everything, but pick up. To the very end. Who would like to go first to respond, please, Sangeeta? Very briefly, thank you.
Arif. Thank you to the audience. Actually, you have raised very interesting points here, and I've been making my notes. I completely agree with the gentleman who actually spoke about age being a barrier to empowerment, and I completely agree with you. Age should not be a barrier at any stage of empowerment. And someone at the back spoke about the grassroots movement. How can we turn women empowerment into a grassroots movement? And you know what? I said, this is a journey and we are all part of this journey. And let us all translate the words that we have been, all what we've been discussing here into action. Why don't women support women in this journey of empowerment? That is when it will become a really grassroots level movement. And finally, I think the points that you have raised are points that ministers in this room will also need to look at. We academics or policymakers cannot have a golden bullet that will solve all the problems. There has to be political support for this, and I'm very sure there's going to be a lot of political support, and the ministers who are here I'm sure are listening and making notes, and they will translate everything into action. Thank you so much. Over to you, Aisa.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you for your interest to the discussions and then your contribution. I think that there were more contributions than questions. Starting with the first one, the importance of education, I totally agree that this is also one of the starting points, but I link them, right? I really link economic empowerment of women and education, in the sense that, as I say in my speech, I strongly believe, I may be wrong, that when women are empowered, economically, they have resources, they have incomes, the return, what I call return on investment at community level, at household level is higher, because she will invest in education for the children, irrespective boys or girls. She will invest in food, she will invest in health, and this, it will have replicated effects. So I strongly believe that it starts there. Definitely, whatever needs to be done in terms of universal access to education is happening in parallel. But it will be enforced, right, if women have peace of mind economically to be able to push that agenda at their family level. This is, and I also do agree that the socio-economic fabric has to be across age group, obviously. That means that the policies and the strategies and interventions that we're doing should be unpacked. You know, it's not one fit all. Definitely, age group 20 to 25 doesn't have the same need that 50 plus, etc. So that means we have to be very specific. What are the issues by group age? What are how do we address those ones? And I think it's extremely important to reflect those ones in the policies and in the interventions that we're having, so that everybody has, benefit from those policies. And then lastly, I think that just to share to my Cameroonian sister that having a tailored interventions when you have cross-border conflicts or conflicts in general is unfortunately something that we see very much in our interventions these days in our respective institutions, because this is the reality on the ground. When you see what is happening in Cameroon, in the Sahel, where I'm coming from, definitely you cannot turn a blind eye on that issue. So we have, for instance, a project which is a trade project, but with peace, a big peace component, because you cannot overlook that aspects. And I think that, unfortunately, unless those conflicts are resolved in other places, we have to mainstream them. We mainstream gender, youth, climate change. Unfortunately, if it happens in one region, it has to be mainstream and taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nadia.
Thank you for raising vibrant questions. I would like to add on to, cottage, medium, small entrepreneurs and grassroots as well. There are some points, what we faced back in our country during COVID, that they are not yet ready for the digitalization and virtual markets. So what we need to do is, enhance their capacity and capability regarding Facebook marketing, digital marketing, and how to take their products in the global market through, virtual marketing. So their Commonwealth people can work out and train these people to develop their skills. So in grassroots, there is a challenge for the women entrepreneurs, because they are not in the formal sector, so they don't have proper documentation, so they cannot reach the formal platforms. So we need to work on that as well. And also there was, we find that in the supply chain, women in all over the world, one person is taking place in the, in getting involved in the procurement section. They are in the supply chain, only one person. And lastly, that what we see regarding, yes, of course, we need to think of our girl child, mental, physical health, but there is a big issue what we found during COVID, that mental health is a big issue for women entrepreneurs. If we don't give them the sound mental state, we cannot make them empowered. So Commonwealth Business Women Forum can work on that as well. And also, lastly, that women are always, narrowing their focus, doing business in the boutique, tailoring, small sectors. Why not in the mega project women don't come? We need to go and, go back and think that women should get involved in the mega projects as well. They should contribute in the mega projects. So we need to think in that way, in light of that way. So yes, we have Commonwealth Business Women Forum Network should work on these issues and try to empower women entrepreneurs to make globally more empowered women in the region, also in every sector, every sphere of their lives. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So we've heard from a range of contributions here. We haven't got time for further questions. I know there's a lot of interest in the audience for that. I'm just going to simply say the following. There is plenty of time and scope over the next 2 days, and I would encourage you to not just see economic empowerment as a standalone topic, really integrate it into all the topics we're covering over the next couple of days. I am going to close and pick up on what you were just saying, Nadia, about and link it to the announcement. You heard Sherry Blair earlier today. Sherry Blair today is becoming an ambassador for the Commonwealth Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator, which is something that the Commonwealth Business Women's Network has been developing in collaboration with the Commonwealth Secretariat. And we have 15 countries, including Bangladesh, in that pilot. People can find out more about that, but we've been working on this with the Global Entrepreneurship Network and Oxentia in the UK, and in consultation with Commonwealth governments as well. So if people want to know more about that, they can come and speak to me. That we are planning to launch in a bigger way later this year, but that's the announcement for today. But the importance that you've all been highlighting, the topicality, the urgency of trade discussions right now, the importance of using all the levers we have available to us. You were talking about the African Free Trade Continental Area and the opportunity that trade agreements have. Remember, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are right at the forefront globally in driving gender provisions in free trade agreements. Those are the Commonwealth countries that are driving it, and I know there are many more. I know that Sangeeta, although she's not mentioned it, she's a trade negotiator for the UK and India, on the UK, or one of the team, I should say, rather than the negotiator. But it shows you the importance of how even now trade negotiators are beginning to look at how they can address these kinds of wider issues, where 5 or 10 years ago wouldn't even be mentioned. And of course, I want to close about this really important point that came out from many interventions in the audience, and the really important point around rural women. And I'm really sorry that Millie Ogden, who was on the panel but wasn't able to join us for reasons I gave earlier, she was from Vanuatu. She has lived through 2 cyclones in 5 years. And if anybody knows about rural women and the impact of economic opportunities for them, it's her. And I'm really sorry she's not been able to join us on this panel, because she would give you a really strong voice and perspective on that. And certainly if people want to connect with her afterwards, ask me, and I'm happy to help facilitate that connection. But I just want to ask all of you now to join me in thanking all of our panel here, most formally for their great contribution this afternoon. And all of you, thank you.
Yeah, let's give them another round of applause, please, as they leave the stage. Thank you. Thank you so much, Arif and the esteemed speakers, for the great insights that we've had today. I don't know about you, but I've taken so many pointers that I'll be taking home with myself. One of them is that women empowerment, the economic empowerment is not a standalone process. It's actually something that has to be embedded in many other conversations that we'll continue to have today and many other days to come. Also, I've taken a point that there is a lot of ways we can use trade to empower women and close the inequality divide. But sadly, we also had that COVID-19 did mess up a lot of gains that had been made earlier. But also I'm encouraged because in this forum, women have been challenged to be involved in mega projects. Are we going to get ourselves there? Yeah? Right. Now, the bottom line one more time is that real change happens when we translate commitment into action. That was key for me as well, and I hope that we will be going home when we leave Kigali to be able to transmit or translate what we've been able to commit into action. Now we're going to another interesting session, which is tea break. Right, when you're in Kigali, we take good care of you. You know, we don't want you to go back home and they're asking, hey, where were you? Eh? Right, so we're going to take a very short break, and that break will transition into the parallel sessions, and I want you to take keen attention to this. Depending on the session that you will be participating in, they will not be happening in the same room. The last 2 sessions that we're going for after the tea break, one of them is happening at the auditorium conference hall, and That one is on engaging men and boys in ending violence against women and girls. And the other one is taking place right here. And that one will be on the intergenerational celebration, and it will be taking place right here. Therefore, I want to urge that you keep time. The tea break is about 30 minutes. Let's just grab the coffee and be able to get back into the rooms for those amazing sessions. I may not be able to be with you, but I want to remind you of the event for this evening, the gala dinner, and tomorrow, the night run.